Okay, welcome to Namibia.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure to meet you again here and at your home.
Yeah.
And it's always a pleasure. We talk so much about it in England and in London, so now being here, it's a great opportunity.
Okay.
Last spring, I got a phone call from an old friend from London, Alhas Hamilton. He asked if I would accompany him on an interesting safari in the Caprivi area. So on the 25th of September 2018, I met Alhas in Frankfurt and we flew out together to Windhoek. The next day, we were met at the airport by the owner of the company, the famous professional hunter and tour operator Robin Hurt. Robin and Alhas have known each other from London and were happy to meet again now on Namibian soil. Robin has spent most of his life in Africa. He was born in London and now lives in Namibia. He owns a wonderful ranch about 2 hours drive from the capital, and he also holds a couple of concessions in the Caprivi area, which is a paradise for hunters. Robin drove us to the small domestic airport at Windhoek, and at 10 o'clock we took off for the town of Katima Mulalo, a journey of only an hour. We got our luggage and rifles and were met by the PH, Daniel Mousley, who is Robin's stepson and has worked for Robin's company for 10 years. Robin's other two sons are also PHs and work mainly in Tanzania. We've been hunting with clients in Namibia a couple of times, but I hadn't been lucky enough to visit and roam through the beautiful Caprivi. Caprivi is a long and narrow strip of Namibian territory that cuts between Angola, Zambia, and Botswana. It starts from the northeast corner of Namibia and reaches the Zambezi River. Its length from the 21st meridian in the east to Zimbabwe is about 450 kilometers, and its width varies from 32 to 105 kilometers. The territory is a flat valley situated in the marshland of the northern part of the Kalahari. Its altitude is about 950 meters above sea level. To the east and northeast, the strip is bordered by the Zambezi River, which forms its border with Zambia. To the south is Botswana, and to the north, Angola. The Okavango and Kwando rivers cross the strip, both ending in large deltas in the Kalahari Desert in Botswana. Here are situated some big game hunting concessions, granted for use for 2 to 4 years, with areas of 100,000 hectares. There are no fences, of course, in contrast to the rest of Namibia, where hundreds of farms for cattle and wildlife are spread. Dan drove us for another hour to the camp in the bush, not far from the Botswana border. The territory where we were to hunt in the next 10 days is 110,000 hectares and covers land across different communities.
No, I'm not going to take it. I'm first going to kiss you. Thank you very much.
You're most welcome.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for welcoming. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Happy birthday.
You're most welcome.
If you do want to call the towel also.
We were accommodated in comfortable tarpaulin bungalows with all necessary amenities. The bungalows were elevated about a meter from the ground because during the rainy season, from November to June, the vast area is flooded with water a meter deep. Now, in September, the only water left was a couple of small ponds and in the Chobe River along the Botswana border.
Yeah, if it's not remembering what's going on, then switch it on and off. Is it coming in or not? Two areas border, so it's nice. We've actually got 2 game scouts with us. Because elephants sometimes cross to both sides, so you must always have a registered game scout.
We had a quick snack, and at 3 o'clock, we went to shoot Alhas's rifles. He had brought a wonderful Wesley Richards bolt rifle in a caliber 416 Rigby and a double-barreled rifle in 470 caliber.
Little bit high.
Just if we're doing, if we've got an elephant at pretty close distance, you're gonna be.
You see, it's dead 12 o'clock, a little bit high,
yeah.
because it's zeroed for 100 meters. You want a little bit down.
I want it zeroed for this range, just because if we do a headshot on an elephant,
Yeah.
I want it dead on.
Okay, so.
It's a palm nut.
Oh, I pulled. It went up.
Next.
After 5 shots and a slight optic correction, we departed on an observation trip around the area. Some village boys told us that they had recently seen 3 buffaloes enter the acacia forest not far from their huts. We left the car and, guided by the boys, slowly moved toward the place. Not far from us, about 200 meters away, a herd of zebra was calmly feeding and looking at us inquisitively. Clearly, the game here was not afraid of people, a sign that they had not been shot at or disturbed by poachers in the area, something I haven't seen for a long time in other African countries. Suddenly, our tracker, Mike, stopped and pointed with a slight gesture towards some thick bushes. He had heard the breaking of branches and movement of animals, which turned out to be the 3 buffalo we were told about. For about 30 minutes, we were listening and slowly moving in their direction until we got close to the buffalo. I stood behind Elkhas and managed for some time to film a very old buffalo who, out of curiosity, made a couple of steps towards my camera. The distance between us was not more than 15 meters, but we stood still. The wind was blowing in our direction, and the animals didn't notice us. After a while, Daniel gave a sign to Alhas that he could shoot at this old male, and a shot rang out.
Reload. Reload, safe. Yeah.
The buffalo ran to the right, and the group hid in the bushes.
You know, they weren't very spooked.
Because I don't know if you realize that the bull that you shot, he's in the middle. He's already down.
Yes.
But just to the left of him, there's a female.
Yes.
She looks pretty badly wounded. On the rear, there's a wound.
Oh, yeah.
I think
what is that?
It's probably lion that attacked her.
Oh.
And we do have an own use permit. That is a perfect one to take out as no
Right.
she's wounded.
We had a license for a trophy buffalo and a female, the meat from which we would give to the community.
Good.
This is guys buffalo hunting in Namibia. Everything can go anyway, but we have our buffalo, so that's the most important thing. And once again, double rifle, close distance. That's what you need to do one after one, and iron sight, no scope. Good work. Thank you, Mr. Roberts.
Pretty sure. That looks like your first shot where that. It was the other side. Didn't get up.
We quickly took some photos in the dark and loaded the buffalo cow into the Jeep, then put the trophy of the old male in the back and dragged the body about 1 kilometer into the bush. We left the body of the cow in the middle of a village, where the villagers were very happy with our present.
So we got a very, very nice buffalo. Really old, sort of classic look where the horns are really drooping down and then coming out. Nice big boss. It was an interesting hunt. The first shot we got him must have been about 14 yards. The shot looked perfect in the reaction, but he took off. We gave him about 15-20 minutes to bleed out a little bit, and then we started following slowly around in the more open area. But then we had to come in a bit thicker with as time was going on. We had the dog who originally pointed him out, and I could see him just quickly put a second shot in him, and then we came around, and unfortunately we bumped into another. It happens, the light is going down, it's a dangerous situation. So we ended up taking a second one, but it was a close call, and then this one was finished off by Alkas perfectly. He was actually lying down not far, the other one's probably 15 yards behind me.
I'm very happy. That's the bull you want to take out. He's big, old, mature. He is basically cast off of the herd, so he pushed out by the young bulls. He had another old bull with him, which take off, and that's why we had to be very careful, because we're moving in the very thick bush. We know that there is one wounded and 2 other buffaloes around him, and we got him 150, 180 yards from original place where we shot him. So it was a very close chase. I'm very happy. First of all, because I used both my bolt action and the double rifle, and it's against proofs that you have to have all right tools when you hunt buffalo, and on the close quarters you need a double rifle, and it proved to be the best tool of the job. Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Here we are at the Conservancy office. we're dropping meat. I think Dean, my PH, will tell you a story why we took the buffalo cow, because they had the license for the own use, and as a result we have a cow which is donating to the community, and tomorrow morning it's going to be a very happy morning in this village.
What you get in Namibia is both what's called own use and also tribal authority meat, which is granted to the tribes and the people of the area. So because they're protecting the species, they get to utilize a certain amount which goes towards food and rations, which is generally equally divided between different areas of any one area. So what we've got here today, which we were asked to take for the community, is an own use animal. That is purely a meat animal, so you try to avoid taking the good genetics out. You find an old cow, for example, or an old shorthorn bull, and it's just purely a meat animal to help provide meat for the community. So what's going to happen now, we're just dropping this off at a post where we were asked to drop it off by the community leaders, is they're going to start cutting up the meat, and then they'll divide it by weight amongst all the registered. Anyone over 18 basically gets a vote or a position in these communities.
Yeah.
So once you reach 18 years old, you then have the right to an allocation of meat. So later on, once they start cutting this up, it'll all be dispersed equally amongst.
Skull.
That will also, the trophy bull will also get dispersed amongst the communities. So this forms most of their protein intake throughout the year. Helps to stop things like poaching, gives them a bit more meat in their diet, and so they really, it's a bit late now, but that's the way the hunt went. But otherwise you'd have a lot more people here. They really appreciate. These communal areas are the forefront in the battle to keep habitat for wildlife, which is the biggest threat against wildlife in this day and age is habitat loss. So by means of keeping these areas for wildlife, they're conserving the areas, and it's really vital, these community conservation system that we have here in Namibia. If you speak to a lot of the local guys, they grew up actually not seeing game in these areas, and literally in the last 5 or 10 years that these areas have been operating, you've generally seen a very large increase in numbers of game, and that's just showing you that the system works. Large areas of land get allocated and sectioned off for game. They call them the core areas, where they do their best to keep people and cattle out. They allow a limited amount of hunting in those areas, which helps pay for the communities, pay for the running, pay for all the anti-poaching teams and the ranger teams that go around and do inspections of these areas and such. So it's got employment, you've got the income that comes from the hunting that pays for projects such as building schools, providing water.
This way, the local people understand that they will benefit from the hunt, and it won't kill the wild animals themselves.
Both for the communities and for ensuring these wildlife have a place.
On a return to the camp at 10 p.m., we celebrated in style our first successful afternoon hunting after our long journey from Europe.
Which is vital.
We are happy today for you. Happy today. We are happy today. We are happy today for you. Happy today. We are happy today. We are happy today for your buffalo. Happy today. We are happy today. We are happy today for you.
Here we are again by campfire in Africa, in Namibia this time. And as I told you during my last film from Tanzania, campfire moment is a very special moment for me, because I know that every day I'll go after this hunting trip, I'll remember these moments of joy. But every time I sit beside campfire in Africa, I miss my friends. So, dear friends, I miss you all. But here we are again in Africa, and we have exciting times. And we did have a cracking day today. We had 22 hours travel from London and Sofia, together with my friend Stilan. We landed in Windhoek, then we had 1 hour flight, then we have hour drive with our dear host, Daniel. And Daniel gave us a very hard time at shooting range, zeroing our rifles. He wants everything to be precise. He will not forgive even the rifle if rifle shoots at 50 meters inch above, which his poor rifle didn't know why he shouldn't do that. Anyway, but then we went and we tried to observe area to see the things, and you guys will see what happened in result of it. But I want to go a bit beyond and ask our generous host Daniel to tell a few words where we are today and what is the special about this area, and how this hunting camp started, when it started, and how many years you've been hunting here.
My name is Daniel Mousley. I was born and raised in Kenya, where I first came to love the bush, spending a lot of time up country near Mount Kenya and areas there. So that's where I first came to love the bush and the wildlife and this sort of life that we have here now in Namibia. Started working for Robin Hood Safaris about 9-10 years ago now, which was when I first moved to Namibia, and I haven't looked back since. We got a fantastic place in the south, and then over the last 3 years is more also when I've been getting into this big game hunting up here in the north of Caprivi, or currently known as the Zambezi region. So right now we're in the pretty much close to the furthermost eastern tip of the Caprivi or Zambezi region. The camp we're in right now is called Lusese Camp, which borders the neighboring area Salambala, which is quite a big conservancy, which is actually where we hunted the buffalo today. It's not too far from here, but this is quite a nice camp to be based from, to give you access to quite a few different areas. We've typically been hunting 5 different areas in the eastern Caprivi. 4 of those are in Masuvia-owned areas, and one of them's a more Mafwe-owned area.
Много топли, много хубаво. Въобще, аз съм много доволен от лагера. За това, че всичко не минимално, ама определено оптимално. Всичко направено с голямо познание въпроса.
Basically, with an elephant, you've got 2 shots, either a heart and lung shot or a brain shot.
Yeah.
Heart and lung is a much bigger target, so I'm happy to take that at a little bit of a longer distance, and it's sometimes the safest shot. So the most important thing at each point is finding the best chance of a killing first shot.
27th September.
Yes. Important day today. Starting our elephant hunting.
We went to bed at midnight, and at 4 in the morning we were woken for coffee and a quick breakfast.
They sit now.
At 5 a.m., as the day was breaking, we left the camp. We first looked around the Chobe River area, which is the only river in the world that flows in both directions. During the rainy season, the waters from the Zambezi River fill the river, flooding wide areas, and the water flows in one direction. Later, when the level gets lower, the water starts to flow in the other direction. At Chobe National Park, 4 countries meet: Botswana, Zambia, Namibia, and Zimbabwe. This is an area that still reminds us how rich with wildlife the African continent once was. Besides the fact that here you can see the largest variety of animals in Botswana, The park is renowned for its enormous elephant population. During the dry season, it has the greatest concentration of elephant in the whole of Africa.
Trying to see what those baboons are fighting.
The Chobe River in the north is the park's lifeline and constant water source. The flooded valleys are filled with grazing buffaloes and other big game. This is home to about 50,000 elephant that are part of the population living in the Kalahari. Their number has remained almost constant in the last 10 years because there is no threat from poachers. Once the sun rose, we saw a splendid view of paradise. To the east were hundreds of pelicans catching fish in small isolated ponds. All around, numerous zebra, waterbucks, and great herds of buffalo were grazing. All the animals were calm, and this abundance of wildlife was a great pleasure for both our eyes and my camera. The Caprivi Strip is characteristic of a tropical climate, with high temperatures and humidity. During the rainy season, which is from December to March in Namibia, a great amount of rain falls, and this is the most humid area in Namibia. The thick plants along the rivers, the dense forests, the sand dunes, and the marshes here are great obstacles for traveling in the area. It is wild, hard to reach, and untouched by civilization. There are more than 450 species of animals and a huge variety of birds. For the protection of this diverse flora and fauna, there are many reserves and national parks established in the area. The biggest national parks are Mamili and Mudumu. These are also the places that attract tourists to Caprivi, and to this, the government recently built the first continuous asphalt road in the area, named the Trans-Caprivi Highway. About 90,000 people live in Caprivi, which is 4% of the total population of Namibia. Its area is 14,785 kilometers squared, and the population lives in small villages. The biggest town and administrative center of the area is Katima Malilo, situated on the Zambezi River in the eastern part of the strip. We continued on the road, looking for elephants. We entered the bush and moved slowly ahead on the soft white sand. For quite some time, we were not able to locate any animals, let alone see any big elephant tracks.
It looks like we've got
At 10 a.m., the temperature was already 40 degrees Celsius, but there was a slight breeze blowing.
some good character. Which is
At
what you
noon,
see with
the heat was
sort of
very
the course
intense,
the
and the
character
wind
that we get with the
could not cool us while we were roaming through the bush. Later in the afternoon, Mike stopped so that he and our PH could examine the trail of 3 elephants. We decided to follow them and continue through the forest in the heat. We were following the tracks for about an hour, making many turns, crossing old roads and beautiful areas.
Daniel, what? We just came all around. I think it seems when we did the circle, they crossed before us, yeah? After us.
After us. They waited, they probably heard the car driving around and they crossed after. But I don't think they were actually too far ahead of us.
Yeah.
Normally in some of these shady places around there, we saw sign that they would normally be standing around. In fact, they did stand for a little while and then they kept on moving. So I think they're a little bit suspicious right now. I think the best plan is we'll get the car to come round and we'll take it.
We decided not to chase these elephants. They had a great head start on us, and we knew that we would probably not reach them before sunset. September 28th. It turned out that some of our group stayed up until 2 o'clock, enthusiastically discussing the hunt and what is ahead of us, though not, of course, with only a glass of water in hand. At 5 a.m., not all of us were awake and ready, some obviously suffering from a bad hangover. But by sunrise at 6 a.m., we were moving. We stopped briefly by a pond full of beautiful white lilies, where little children were fishing for catfish, and our PH's dog, Squeeze, jumped excitedly into the water to retrieve a stick that Daniel had thrown. September 29th. As usual, we met the sunrise along the Chobe River, looking again for elephant tracks. We drove close to the riverbank and observed for some time a big herd of buffalo by the river. They were grazing calmly along the shore and slowly started to move towards Botswana when they saw us. I flew over them with my drone and managed to film some very interesting panoramic views. The herd had probably 700 to 800 animals of all ages. They were not afraid of the drone and gradually got used to its sound. Then I flew over the river and the nearby area, observing with pleasure the wonderful scenery and animals.
Best time.
This is pork, it's called pork belly.
September 30th. From 2 o'clock in the morning, there was a strong wind that disturbed our sleep and woke us prematurely, before the person that had brought us hot coffee at exactly 4 o'clock. At 11 a.m., we were in Katima Malilo, where we left 2 tires for repair, got some gas for the car, and met a famous guest and old friend of Alkas, who had arrived in Windhoek at 11:40 from London. This was the legendary hunter and rifle craftsman Paul Roberts. For more than 50 years, he has crafted rifles for his clients all over the world. Alkas has invited Paul to accompany him in Caprivi, having bought from Paul the 2 rifles he had with him on safari, the Wesley Richards 416 Rigby caliber and the specially made double-barreled 470 caliber. Our PH Daniel also owns a wonderful double-barrel 470 caliber bought from Paul, which was fitted with an aimpoint telescopic sight. Dan, Robin Hurt, and Paul Roberts have known each other for a long time, and Paul has hunted with them many times. We had lunch at a Portuguese restaurant, and at 4 p.m., we were already at our camp, about an hour's drive from the town.
We are, who says stuff, we say, we're welcome. We are, who says stuff, we say, we're welcome.
Hello, everybody.
We're welcome.
Take your towel off the floor.
We are, who
Thank you.
says stuff, we
Oh,
say,
that's
we say,
Okay,
we're
Wendy.
welcome. Welcome!
1st October. At exactly 5 o'clock, all of the team went out to where we had seen the elephant tracks 2 days before. Once again, we found fresh tracks and started to follow them. We carried both rifles just in case, not knowing what we might meet in the thick green forest. Sadly, the elephants had once again returned to Botswana as they do each morning. Paul said that it was very strange for him to be on safari in Africa without a rifle, but he was thoroughly enjoying the beautiful morning, the sunrise, and seeing the wildlife all around. Paul, who is now in his 78th year, has had the good fortune and health to experience 35 successful African safaris so far. He showed us pictures of all kinds of beautiful animals and the trophy of the last legally hunted black rhino, shot in Kenya many years ago. Paul had trouble walking in the bush, so we walked slowly in consideration of him, discussing the hunt and the elephant tracks we were following. October 2nd. We woke at 3 a.m. and 40 minutes later headed towards a lake. Ahead of us was a jeep belonging to a friend of ours, Michael, who was towing a large motorboat. We arrived at the lake shore at sunrise and put the boat into the water. We headed east, hoping to check 1 or 2 islands, but were soon stuck in dense reed beds, which we struggled to get out of. We asked for help from a local fisherman whose young son was steering his canoe. The boy took us out to clearer waters, and we were able to reach the Botswana border. We met only fishing boats and their crew, who were checking the previous night's nets for fish. Unfortunately, reeds covered most of Lake Lukasa, and we had no visibility from the boat. I got out on the shore of a small island, and with my drone, looked for a channel through, but apart from the route we had already taken, we were surrounded by reeds. We decided to finish our marine reconnaissance and return to the shore where we had left the truck. We put the boat back on the trailer and our friend left, promising to send us his fly fishing programs for 2019. By 2 p.m., we were back in camp, having stopped at 3 areas on the way back to look for elephant tracks, and decided to camp out in the forest that evening.
Can you take my photograph, please?
At sunset, we had dinner, while the sky to the west was covered by smoke. We had a glass of white wine and discussed the program for the next day, getting to bed at 10 p.m., full of hope for a successful day to follow. Not far from us, a big herd of elephants were grazing. We hoped that they would stay in the area until sunrise when the hunt could begin. 3rd of October. We woke at 5 o'clock, took our essential gear, and set off on foot in the dark so that we could reach the elephant by dawn. At 6 o'clock at the forest edge, we spotted some large figures, and Alhas positioned his rifle on the tripod. We observed a large male, but he soon went into the forest and the others followed. Meanwhile, we went around to the west, by which time the sun had come up and I was able to film more clearly. Several times we were close to the elephants. There were many males in the group of all different ages. By 7 o'clock, Alhas had chosen his trophy. He got into position and calmly took aim at the elephant, though I wasn't able to see very well from my position to the left. When the moment was right, the hunter shot, and his 416 caliber bullet flew out of the barrel. Our PH Daniel took a second backup shot as he and Alhas had previously arranged. The elephant made a great sound, turned and ran away to the right with the rest of the animals.
Yeah, we had several perfect opportunities, but one was a bit young and this.
The herd that came out here, one of the bulls was a massive size, but I didn't see the ivory.
Yeah, you get that.
Yeah.
There was a couple of very big bodied.
Yeah.
20 minutes later, once we were sure that the rest of the group had moved far enough away, we decided to look for the elephant. For a long time, we were not able to see any blood, which was a little worrying. At this time, Paul, who had stayed out of the forest, arrived in the jeep. We continued to walk around and moved ahead of a group of male elephants that had gathered. Our tracker deliberately chose to approach with the wind behind us so that the animals would smell us, and they did indeed move on. It was then that we found the body of the elephant, which had been surrounded by his brothers, who may have been saying farewell to him.
Yes! Yes!
I told you this thing can run 200 yards, and we were sure. You, angels, you're making us doubt ourselves, eh?
Fuck off, angel. Yes! The best solution.
You are doubting me.
Yes!
The hunter and his PH were overjoyed as finally, on the 6th day of his Caprivi safari, he had managed to accomplish one of his dreams. Paul and Alhas discussed the kill, and we had a short photo session. The helpers arrived to strip down the carcass, which took them until it was dark. They then distributed 4 to 5 kilograms of meat to each of the families in the local villages, who were extremely pleased with the gift. We returned to camp early and that evening celebrated the wonderful hunt and elephant trophy, which had been a long-standing ambition for Alhas. This was his first African elephant from the savannah, but he promised us it wouldn't be his last. "5th October. At 8:30 a.m., we left for what we thought was a small town nearby, Runda, from where we were flying to Windhoek. The journey to Namibian capital took an hour, and from there we drove south for 1.5 hours to the ranch belonging to our host, Robin Hurt.
Young boys. Hello. Uncle Robin, I enjoyed it. He's the most. And today we were driving, we had to drive long, yeah, but we also had the punches.
Daniel continued from Runda by road with our luggage, and we expected him to arrive at the farm the next day around noon. Robin had bought the property 18 years ago and had amassed about 20,000 hectares. Interestingly, the neighboring properties have fences no higher than 1.2 meters, which stop the cattle from roaming, but not the wildlife. This way, the habitat feels natural to the game and the animals are able to move around freely.
Nice to meet you, Simon. Al. I've been hunting with your husband. Lovely man. Yes. Alma Alkas, nice to meet you.
The best cooking team in Namibia. Here's the boss. Okay. Jolly good.
At sunset, we settled in a cozy lodge, beautifully furnished with trophies and paintings. We ate dinner and chatted around the fire, then went to bed early, exhausted by our 1,200-kilometer journey from Caprivi. "6th October. The morning was wonderful, and we anticipated a great day.
I felt like a wine flow last night. After days in the bush, when you come to this. How do you feel?
I feel very well. Living in the lap of luxury is
Yeah. It's the herd is really after a few days in the bush.
Having practiced briefly with the rifles that had been loaned to us, Robin then guided us himself along rocky paths in search of mountain zebra.
No, look at this. You think about it. You take the safety off, and then that touches. This trigger is so sensitive.
Next to the first one.
That's why it doesn't kick. With a light trigger rifle, it's bloody easy to let it off.
Right.
By mistake.
We saw a small herd of zebra from a vantage point on a hill, which had spotted us sometime before and were already running away. 30 minutes later, we saw a second group, so we stopped the car and continued on foot. We walked carefully in a line, hiding behind rocks and bushes.
Slowly, slowly.
After 40 minutes, Aljas got permission from Robin to shoot a male zebra. He was using a lone rifle, as his rifles were on their way with Daniel. A caliber 7mm Remington, precise enough for a shot of 250 to 300 meters.
Okay, Alcas, it's the very bottom one. The very last one in the bushes. He's coming out. Yeah. Don't forget the safety. Don't forget the safety. Yeah. Reload. Hit him again. The last one. Hit him again. No, you shot over.
Aljas' first shot hit its mark, but the zebra ran away up the rock.
I think he's hit all right. Yeah, I think he went down. Second shot was a miss.
Yeah, because he turned when I'm getting behind it, so he turned.
Yeah,
It,
but
it doesn't matter. It doesn't
It's
matter.
very difficult when it's
It doesn't
round.
matter. You say to people, shoot again.
Yeah, just in case.
Yes, in case, it's better. 2 bullets in is better.
It's very tight.
Yeah, that's why I told you, behind the shoulders. Perfect. Because he was slight-handed.
We soon tracked the animal to where it fell and took photos of this great trophy of a mountain zebra, whose skin pattern is quite different to the steppe zebra.
The difference between the mountain zebra and the plain zebra. The plain zebra does not have the grid pattern. You see that grid pattern?
Yes.
The mountain zebra has that. The mountain zebra has no shadow stripe. The plain zebra has shadow stripe. The mountain zebra, the stripes go all the way to the bottom of the neck. The plain zebra, it stops here, halfway. The mountain zebra, the hoof is longer,
Look at
longer and
Hoopito.
narrower, and narrower. They have a red face. The normal zebra doesn't have a red face. And they have here a dewlap. You see that?
Yes.
That's called a dewlap, which only the mountain zebra has. And the reason he has that is because his windpipe is like that, so that he can get oxygen into his lungs when he's climbing the mountains. Yeah.
We returned for lunch to find that Daniel and his helper Lucius had arrived safely.
Did you get enough? Tell you one thing, Dan, if he gets one, it'll be the shoulder. 416.
I have 10 bullets. I want to check this. I believe in
We're here today in Namibia, Robin Hurt and I'd like to introduce Robin to you all. We've been friends for many years, and Robin is the Dean of Professional Hunters, one of the last of the old school, and he's a man that I've known for many, many years, and I really feel that his opinion on certain things about hunting today would be of great interest to some of your people that will be watching this video. Robin, I'd like to ask you some questions which I think you'll be able to answer, and your opinion will be greatly valued by a lot of people who'll be watching this. How did you get started into professional hunting?
Very easy. I grew up with it. My father was a senior game warden in Kenya. He was a highly decorated army officer who commanded the 5th Battalion King's African Rifles during the last war in Ethiopia. And he got his DSO there, which is, as you know, the second highest medal in the British Army. So when he retired from the army, because his passion was wildlife and hunting, he joined the game department. In those days, the Kenya Game Department's main work was control. Poaching was hardly a problem, but animal conflict with humans was a huge problem. So yes, he hunted himself probably well over 500 elephant on game control, and countless buffalo and other animals that were problem animals. He never shot anything that was not a problem animal. So as a boy, I grew up going on safari with him, and we also we had a ranch at Naivasha in Kenya, and I did all my early hunting on the ranch with my boyhood friend Tinia, who was a Maasai, and we used to go out hunting together, and my mother used to freak out because we'd go away for days at a time in the bush, and she didn't know where we were or when we But anyway, that's how I got into it. And when I left school, my first job was with Mrs. Nancy Miller at Naivasha. She had a big ranch, and the hippo were doing tremendous damage to her lucerne. So Temple Borum, who was the game warden of that whole Naivasha and Narok district, made me an honorary game warden at the age of 17. It's pretty hard to believe, yes, but it's true. And with that, legalizing my activities on Lake Naivasha, I proceeded to do hippo control. And I shot a number of rogues that were causing trouble. Then, because I was due to go to Sandhurst, my father wanted me to take up the family tradition in the army. I was never very keen on that, but I went along with him. And when I was talking to Mrs. Miller one day, she said, you know, Robin, you should follow your heart. If you want to go hunting, you go hunting. Just tell your dad. Go up to him and say, Dad, I'm sorry, I'm not going in the army. And that's exactly what I did. Now, to say that my father was disappointed would be an understatement. He was devastated, literally, because I was the first to break a family tradition. Anyway, a few years later, he had the grace to say he was so pleased to see I was doing what I wanted to do. And so I then joined Karandani. This is in 1963 as a trainee hunter. And I did a training with them for 6 months. And that 6 months was purely on how to outfit safaris and how to hunt game with clients. I already had a lot of experience on hunting dangerous game, and by the time I left school at 17, I'd shot the big five several times over. So hunting was not my problem. My problem was learning how to hunt with other people. And I'll never forget, in 1963, I got my license towards the end of the year, and my very first client was a Brazilian. And I got the safari through a company in Nairobi, an ammunition and rifle company called Ludecker and Company. And Mr. Ludecker found these clients for me, and I took them out, and we went to our farm at Naivasha, and we were hunting there. There was lots of game there. Anyway, one day we are tracking 3-year-old bull buffaloes, and suddenly I hear a shot go off behind me. And I turn around and I see this warthog running off with its stomach hanging out. And I turn around to the client and I said, "Why did you do that?" He said, "Oh, I saw a big warthog, I decided to shoot." Of course, the buffalo all panicked and took off.
Departed.
So now we've lost the buffalo, they've gone. And I'm very irritated because the hunt was ruined. But we now had a warthog that was wounded, and I didn't actually want to have to spend the rest of the day on the warthog, but we did. So we tracked up the warthog, and he goes into an ant bear hole. So I'm leaning over, looking into the ant bear hole like this, being very careful, because you never stand in front of an ant bear hole, because the warthog comes out and you can get hurt. Off goes this guy with his 450, 500, right here by my ear. The blast knocked me over. Blood was pouring out of my ear. He burst my eardrum. I turned around and I gave him one hell of a clout across his face. And it's the only time in my whole life I've ever hit anybody at all.
That was the beginning of your career.
My very first client. It almost ended My first safari almost ended my career. I nearly got shot. I mean, literally, it missed me by that much. Yeah. And so, to end the story, Tinia and his cousin, who were tracking the buffalo, turned around to me and they said, "Eh, Mzee, sisi hapana ina bogo na hii mtu. Yeye tu ua sisi." And that's the translation is, "We're not hunting buffalo with this guy. He's going to kill us."
After that, we hung one of the zebra legs on a tree as bait for leopards. A male had been a regular visitor to the spot and had been filmed there. In spite of having owned this land for 18 years, Robin had only discovered 2 years previously a very beautiful canyon and had constructed a road into the mountains to reach it. I flew the drone over it and long shot the great scenery and beautiful clouds. We returned to the lodge as night fell and sat chatting with a glass around the fire. Later in the evening, a storm hit and it rained until almost 7 a.m. the next morning. October. We had already accomplished our hunting schedule and were now just enjoying our walks and conversations about bygone days when Africa was crowded with game, and of course we discussed the advantages and disadvantages of one or another heavy caliber. After a traditional English breakfast, we went out in search of a good trophy springbuck. The animals didn't let us get too close, and it was not easy to stalk any old bucks. The springbok hid behind a hill covered in thick bushes, but Alkas managed to follow it, and his shot was accurate. It turned out to be a wonderful old springbok, a trophy that Alkas didn't have in his collection so far.
Very nice.
Doesn't measure well, doesn't it? The thickness of the base.
Very thick, very old.
I told you not to get him a better one than mine. You've gone...
Your hat is shading you a bit, but
This was his first visit to Namibia, and some of the local species were not yet in his trophy room at his Bulgarian home, the silver birches, close to the town of Sredets.
It was my first safari with Daniel. I'm actually filming this because I want to see it in 20 years. Because I have a strange feeling. It's a great start, which is gonna last long. I want to say thank you to Daniel for being great professional hunter, for being honest and kind and attentive and paying attention to every detail and looking after everyone in the party. And it was a great pleasure to hunt with him. And Daniel, thank you very much. Dan will show you how to use them with the interview we did with Uncle Paul, the man of caliber.
Oh, huh. How are you? I'm fine. How are you?
How's the old girl?
I'm feeling so good today.
Really?
I could go on another mountain, no problem.
Don't encourage him.
8th October. At 10 o'clock, we loaded the luggage in Daniel's car and said goodbye to Robin and the local staff and helpers.
See you in December.
Okay.
If not before. Yes, yes.
Paul? Ciao, bambino! Thank you, Robin, for killing me. Okay. It's been lovely having you here. Take care. Bye-bye.
Unfortunately, I spoke to her. She doesn't have chicken or fish.
Thank you. It was a great pleasure. Thank you. Thank you, my brother. Thank you. All right. Okay.
Bye-bye. Safe
Bye-bye.
journey.
Thank you.
Nice having you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thanks very much.
That same evening, we flew out to Frankfurt, and by the next day, we were back home, bringing wonderful memories from our hunt in Caprivi. I would recommend this destination as somewhere to enjoy the wildlife, the game diversity, and of course, to hunt with our professional hunters from the team of Robin Hurt. Happy hunting!